Good afternoon, shalom lekulam, and welcome to our department seminar here at the Bar-Ilan University, Department of Jewish Art. We are honored to host today as a guest lecturer Tom Fogel, and Leor Jacobi will introduce him. So please, Leor.
Welcome everyone back to the department seminar after breaks for Passover, for Pesach, and no breaks for war, and hopefully no upcoming breaks in the future. So it's my pleasure to introduce Tom Fogel to you today. Tom is a young and upcoming scholar, researcher. He is a folklorist and ethnographer specializing in Yemeni-Jewish culture and the history of ethnographic research in Yemen. That's Bethiman. His research interests include Jewish culture in Muslim lands and traditional archives related to religion, folk literature, and music. Tom wrote his dissertation at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and held several postdoctoral positions, most recently at the IFK, International Research Center for Cultural Studies in Vienna. Currently, he is a research associate at the Ben-Gurion Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism at Ben-Gurion University. His Hebrew monograph, My Conversations with the Yemenites, the study of Yemeni Jews in S.D. Goiten's Ethnographic Archive, will soon be published by the Ben Tzvi Institute. By the way, that at the Ben Tzvi Institute in Jerusalem, I had the pleasure of first meeting Tom at a conference where he delivered an outstanding presentation. Alongside academia, Tom practices Yemeni silversmithing, which he learned from a silversmith master. So he practices the traditional methods and which have continued to be developed. And Tom also serves as a cantor and a paitan. So we have before us a Renaissance man. Without further ado, Tom.
Okay, Leo, thank you very much for this generous introduction. And thank you also, Tzvi and Marianne, for organizing this meeting. And good afternoon to everyone here. Thank you for joining. I'm very happy to share with you today some of my research in recent years. What I'm going to talk about is a part of my research project, which I'm preparing as a book, dealing with Jewish vernacular religion in Yemen. And I'm just about to explain what is this term, vernacular religion, meaning all sorts of practices that are on the crossroads between religion, magic, and folk medicine. Mostly the use of amulets, spells, and incantations, but also other practices such as ziyara, saint veneration, and more. And I will start my presentation. Okay, can everyone see it?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, for some reason it doesn't work. Worked too much. Okay. So, historically speaking, the study of such phenomena worldwide has been characterized by an intensive discussion about how to name these phenomena. Most of us no longer use the term superstition, but there have been other terms in use. For a long time, folk religion was considered useful in scholarship, although it later became clear that the word folk immediately implies a certain hierarchy, imagining a distinction between some sort of superior or pure so-called religion and other more simple or even polluted forms of religious life. One of the terms that I have found useful is vernacular religion. This term was suggested by the folklorist Leonard Primiano, who defined vernacular religion as it is lived. It is a term that in some sense precedes what has now become a very popular concept, lived religion. That is, religion as people actually practice it, and not necessarily as it is written in books or in canonical texts. One of Leonard Primiano's suggestions was not to speak in terms of an abstract notion of belief, but rather to look for expressions of belief. For example, in narratives such as folk tales or in objects. And here, in some ways, he is parallel to David Morgan's ideas on religious materiality. This is the way I would like to approach the objects that are in the center of this lecture, Jewish amulets from Yemen, as objects that express belief. In the abstract, for the lecture, I used the term multidimensional, and I regretted it later, but okay. And I used it regarding the method of analysis. And it might be useful to explain what I mean by this term. Amulets can be approached through several lenses. The first is the material one, looking at the way the amulet is made, its materials, and the craft practices surrounding it. Secondly, many amulets, and the main ones that I will be talking about today, contain a textual element. So the second kind of data to be analyzed is the text, the content of what is written inside the amulet. While the first material aspect is linked to the study of Jewish material culture in general or material culture in the Middle East, the textual data requires the study of Jewish magic, which is a very well developed field. Both of these kinds of information necessitate branching out into these scholarly fields in order to say something about what we find in Jewish amulets in Yemen. Yet I approach these objects through a third layer of analysis, which is the narrative one, meaning the narratives surrounding these objects, what people say about them, both those people who made them or still make them, and those who use them. And this aspect can provide what Clifford Geertz called a thick description of the objects in their cultural setting. Although there is considerable research done both on Yemeni material culture and in the field of Jewish magic, I feel that focusing on one community in modern times, mainly the 19th and 20th century Jewish communities in Yemen, in our case, readdressing existing material, but also finding new material, and also adding the narrative dimension to the materials will together allow to create a more holistic examination of these objects in their context as an expression of Jewish vernacular religion in this region. And now I'll move just to talk a little about sources. My sources derive from several places. For the examination of amulet manuscripts, mainly the amulet books, prescription books. I explore a fraction of the vast quantities of such manuscripts available online in the National Library of Israel, for example, and especially those kept in the Bill Gross collection. Especially, including a small but important collection of actual amulet examples, and you can see here on the right. And I mean, this is the relation between the book and what scholars of Jewish magic call the end product. I mean, the actual parchment that is to be used. Okay. For the use in adornment and jewelry, on the other hand, I rely mostly on previous research, which was done very thoroughly by scholars such as Carmela Abdar, Esther Muchavsky-Schnapper, and Aviva Muller-Lancet, and the collections that they studied, notably the Israel Museum. So these are the main sources of knowledge that I study in this respect. And thirdly, narratives that I derive from a variety of folkloric or oral history archives, which I have studied in recent years. Among them, the archive of Shlomo Dov Goitein and other archives such as the Folklore Research Archive at the Hebrew University or the Chaim Azaz Archive in Jerusalem. Alongside these archival sources, I also conduct interviews with people who immigrated from Yemen to Israel. So after this somewhat long introduction, we will start to talk about the cultural context and especially about the amulet writers and their social roles in Yemeni society. Later on, we will go into the objects themselves, and there I will discuss several features or aspects that I find in these objects. In this part, some of the materials are ones that I have already done substantial work on, analyzing them, and even in some cases already publishing them, but others are very new to me and are more in the line of preliminary observations and thoughts. And finally, I will move forward to the moment of immigration from Yemen to Palestine and later to the state of Israel, and try to point out several trends that emerge after immigration and even to this day. And since I am not a scholar of art history or Jewish art, I'm especially pleased to have the opportunity to share these thoughts with you today, and I will be very grateful for the discussion that follows. Okay. So, to begin, and in order to situate us within the context of Jewish society in early modern and late modern Yemen, it is important to point out that the majority of Jewish society lived in very small communities scattered across the vast rural areas in western Yemen, which is the more fertile region and where most of the population lived. These communities sometimes consisted of several dozen Jews, and sometimes even fewer. There were, of course, larger centers, for example, in Sana'a, the capital, but the majority of the Jewish population lived in these very small communities, which were very close in terms of daily life to their Muslim neighbors. In these rural communities, Jews were mainly craftsmen, silversmiths, blacksmiths, tailors, potters, weavers, etc. Additionally, each religious community, meaning the Jewish and the Muslim one, often had its own specialized healers, living either in the village itself or in the neighboring villages. Sometimes Muslim and Jewish healers existed in a certain kind of hidden or open rivalry, although there were also many daily instances in which members of one religious group would turn to the healer of the other group. Importantly, since the majority of the Muslim population was illiterate, while in contrast, the majority of Jewish men in Yemen knew how to read, and a large portion of them also knew how to write, this literacy, combined with their being essentially the only non-Muslim religious minority in Yemen, contributed to the Jews being especially recognized as amulet writers. And we have historical accounts of this already in Evan Sapir by Yaakov Sapir in the middle of the 19th century, in which he describes several amulet writers who were very well known within their Jewish community, but also to the broader Muslim society and even to the higher strata of the ruling class. This suggests that the practice of amulet writing carried substantial social capital. One example, we read about a rabbi in the village of Jirwah in central Yemen, and I quote, you see it on the right. He is well trained in incantations, amulets, and fortune telling. So even the Muslims come and ask his advice. They ask for his help and amulets, for he knows also Arabic script. He is famous in all the land, and his name is praised also by the king's lords and servants. This description also correlates with later studies, like this one you see here by Professor Batzion Eraki Klorman, as well as with Jewish Yemeni manuscripts like the one presented here, in which we find specific amulets for Muslims. And it reads, this is an amulet for the Gentiles. From narratives and also from written instructions in manuscripts, we know that there is an array of practices that the writer should perform before writing. This, of course, is not unique to this case, the Yemeni case, but forms part of a broader Jewish tradition and mainly concerns purification rituals. These writers, they perform tevilah, avoid the company of women, and some narratives depict the writers reciting several verses many times before they start to write the text. There are also specific times in which one may or may not write an incantation. And there is even a specific blessing, including the use of Shem U'Malchut, a blessing recorded in a manuscript, which one should recite before writing the text. Interestingly, there is, as one might expect, a certain degree of secrecy surrounding the actions of the amulet writers. These writers are referred to as Baal Hefetz, Hefetz being the term in Yemeni Hebrew for a book of amulet prescriptions. Thus, Baal Hefetz means the owner of the book, and it's corresponding with the parallel Arabic term Sahib Kitab, likewise means a person who possesses a book of such incantations or related material. There is, therefore, a certain degree of secrecy in the actions of these people, especially in keeping their manuscripts in their possession and not allowing others to see their content. This relates both to a belief in the danger inherent in reading these texts without proper training or spiritual purity, and also, as noted, to the fact that this profession carried considerable social capital and financial benefit. Revealing one's knowledge to fellow healers would effectively increase one's competition. And this too must be in mind when we consider the secrecy surrounding these practices. Okay. As in other cases of astral magic, that is magic that is connected to the situation of the stars, the Baal Hefetz would usually perform some kind of diagnostic procedure in order to determine what kind of amulet the patient or the client required. In this respect, it is interesting to note that a prominent feature of Muslim Yemeni astrology was the focus on the 28 so-called lunar mansions. These are the star constellations that appear in correlation with the moon. These 28 lunar mansions appear frequently in Muslim manuscripts and more broadly in Yemeni folk culture, and they also appear in Jewish manuscripts. And interestingly, the Jewish manuscripts are the only ones, at least that I found until now, that also include drawings of the star constellations themselves. And you can see it here on the right. You can see the name of the constellation and then a kind of a sketch of these how the stars are aligned. And this example that you see here illustrates the importance of the munaggem, the man who knows how to read the stars. He looks at the manuscript where the manuscript details how the constellation actually looks like, and then he can look at the sky and identify this constellation. This kind of knowledge is also reflected in oral accounts from Yemeni Jews who tell that they would sit and learn these observations of the stars from their Muslim neighbors. Okay, so going on to the actual making of the object. What does it mean to make an amulet in Yemen? To start from the outside, an amulet parchment was kept usually in a silver pendant. The amulet's protective nature derived firstly from its materiality that repelled demons or the evil eye. The use of silver and other metals and the use of round shiny surfaces called lum'a and the sound of the danadel, the silver bells, all made the pendant itself to be considered an amulet. And indeed, many pendants were created sealed to begin with, not meant to insert a parchment in them. The Jewish craftsman would make the silver pendant while the rabbi or the healer or the Baal Hefetz would inscribe the amuletic text. In cases when the amulet was a silver plate, like you see here, these two roles were manifested in one person. In both these cases, the materiality of the silver pendant was mediated by Jews, and because they were the only ones practicing silversmithing. But just to complicate the picture a little more, I need to mention that there are also, of course, non-textual objects that have protective or amuletic trait. For example, this khurata, which is an amulet for the groom after the wedding, which in this kind of fabric case contains all sorts of materials, but it does not contain any text. And likewise, we can see here in a sketch made by Erich Brauer in the 30s in Jerusalem, an amulet made by Jewish women in Palestine. And it's very interesting. We can go back to this at the end because it's clearly not a Yemeni styled object. So maybe later we can talk about that. But going back to the textual side. Regarding the text written inside, while not many actual amulet parchments survive or are available for research, amulet prescriptions books are found very widely. And these books, kept hidden from inquisitive eyes by their original owners, are now easily accessible in many libraries and collections. And then when we look at these texts, we can see several common features. And these features are, of course, not unique to Yemen or even to Jews of Muslim land, but I will try to talk about that briefly. These texts typically are performative texts, such as an incantation or a request written in Hebrew, Aramaic, or Judeo-Arabic, sometimes combining all three. It also incorporates graphic elements such as magical script, textual squares or triangles, Solomon's seal, and other graphic elements. These features are common to Jewish magic in general, and particularly in Islamic context. And for example, here in the middle, you can see an amulet written by the request of a Muslim woman. It's written by a Jew. And this Muslim woman wanted to regain the love of her son. And for some reason, it was not given to her. It was kept inside a book. But this is just an example. So you see the Judeo-Arabic text, and you can see all of these graphic elements that I will talk about shortly. It would not be an exaggeration to say that all or most of the textual elements found in the Jewish amuletic texts that I look at already appear in much earlier sources from the Cairo Geniza, or even in older examples, as we can see in studies by Gideon Boak and Yuval Harari, and Gal Sofer, which is here, and many others. Although in Yemen, the earliest example that we have dates to the 17th century by the very famous Rabbi Shalom Shabazi, this does not mean that such materials did not exist earlier. Indeed, as I mentioned, we have much earlier evidence for the majority of these elements. Yet, there are certain kinds of features that are, in a sense, unique to the Yemeni case, and I will try to point several of them. So, to begin with, we have certain incantations that reflect the cultural reality in Yemen. For example, sense locust, were a major problem for farmers in rural Yemen, we find a relatively abundant number of incantations against locusts. Similarly, in this rural society, cows and other livestock were an important component of daily life. We also find incantations relating to livestock, especially cows. And on a different subject, because up until the 20th century, Jews in Yemen sometimes had two wives. It's called Tabina, the other wife. We also find incantations commissioned by women who did not wish to lose the love of their husbands to this Tabina, to this second wife. Another example that you can see here is called Sab'a al-Uhud, the seven adjurations, which are seven adjurations or incantations bestowed upon King Solomon, and it's very widespread also in other countries, in other cultural contexts. This figure of Solomon as a master of this kind of arts, but this kind of special formation of this incantation is found in Yemen. Okay, other than that, we have some other special features. So the most common visual aspect in these kind of texts are, as I said, these kind of magical scripts, and these two are sometimes called the angelic alphabet and the string letters, and they are also not special to this special case. But what is interesting here is the interpretation of the people reading these signs. So, for example, this man here, Mori Yaish Yahya, he explained these symbols as representing names of angels. And I'm quoting from his explanation. After that, one writes an azima, an adjuration, an amulet. You write huruf, letters. You write an hour and letters, and it is forbidden to read them. There are names. Talasim, this is the name of these figures or sketches. Talasim are angels. That's what he says. And indeed, the word also in Arabic, and I think it has also maybe Greek roots, means talisman or charm or seal, or this representation of these kind of mysterious and maybe meaningless words. The question of meaning is also apparent in narratives by Yemeni Jews, because these kind of symbols are in a way false. They are false symbols, meaning people cannot make sense out of them. Some Yemeni Jews actually used this kind of meaningless or nonsense in order to gain any sort of profit. And in this book that you see here, we have a lovely story about a Jewish Yemeni merchant coming to a Muslim city, and a Muslim girl asks him to write an amulet for her to get married, and he has no knowledge whatsoever about how to do it, but he takes a piece of paper and just scribble all of these kinds of meaningless shapes, and a year later she gets married, and he gets a very nice gift from her father for his so-called efforts. But on the other hand, some Jews actually did try to make sense of these symbols found in manuscripts. And here you can see one, Chaim Hibshush. He was a very well renowned Jewish Yemeni scholar in 19th century Sana'a, and he's famous for writing a book known in English as a Vision of Yemen, and among other things, he used to make a living out of copying these kind of inscriptions on stones, himyari, these kind of pre-Muslim writings that you find in Yemen. He used to copy them because of the popular belief that these writings were actually symbols that contain the power to control demons or stuff like that. And here on the upper side, you can see a manuscript that actually specifies that these letters are himyari letters. So we have also this kind of textual example for this kind of belief. Okay. While some people used these kind of meaningless shapes and graphic drawings in order to make any sorts of profit, there was one significant figure, Mori Yahya Gafeh. He was a friend of Chaim Hibshush that we saw, and he is most known for establishing a reformative movement called Dor De'ah, which sought to actually eradicate all sorts of practices that they considered as superstitious. Among other things, it was following his acquaintance with the Viennese scholar Edward Glaser that you see here. So Gafeh was also a silversmith, and because he could not make his community stop using holy names or sacred names for amuletic purposes, he did something quite different, and I quote, unable to eradicate the custom, he was forced to replace biblical verses with meaningless combinations of letters. Being skilled in craftsmanship, he personally created such plaques. When asked about the meaning of the letters he inscribed, he responded wittily, I do not know what I'm writing, but I do know what I'm not writing. Okay. So this is another case of trying to use this kind of lack of meaning or secret meaning of these shapes. And finally, I want to point out that indeed these texts have a so-called problematic aspect for maybe more official Jewish halachic standpoint for crossing religious boundaries, as we see here, for example, in this kind of text that addresses Jesus and Muhammad and all sorts of powers that are unheard of in everyday Jewish life. Okay, so I'm skipping a little. From the beginning of the 17th century and increasingly in the 18th century, printed Jewish books from Europe arrived in Yemen in large quantities, transported via trade routes through the Red Sea. Among these printed works, which profoundly influenced the spiritual world of Yemeni Jews, was Sefer Raziel HaMalach, a book that had a significant impact on the practice of Jewish magic. The prestige of imported printed books accelerated their adoption within the Jewish community, as demonstrated in the following narratives by Ibrahim Rada, a Jewish healer who immigrated from Lower Yemen to Israel in the 50s. And I'm reading. I opened the book myself, the book of Raziel HaMalach, in print. It was a better book than Kitab Atib. Kitab Atib, he means by that the local manuscripts. I wrote amulets from it, everything that was needed. In Nahma, the name of the village, only my father had that book. It even contained, I believe, Shema Meforash. I learned from my teacher, Mori Salem Asusi. I followed his actions. It was our book, and I followed his way, what he was reading, and I could read and understand what was written, everything very clear. So Rada's story demonstrates that manuscripts containing magical knowledge from the Islamic cultural world coexisted with this new source of influence. And when we examine manuscripts, we see like a spectrum. Some manuscripts exhibit strong Arabic influences, such the one you see on the left. While others, such as manuscript named Shimushei Sarim that you see on the right, show minimal to no Arabic components, and significantly you see here these very famous graphic illustrations that are so identified with Sefer Raziel. Okay. If we go to other kinds of influences on the way these objects were shaped, we can look to regional influences in visual aspects and scribal practice. And here I relate to the location of Yemen to the shores of the Indian Ocean and very close to Eastern Africa. and I'll try to point out to several influences that I see. So firstly, if we look at the way human or demonic figures are portrayed, are designed in Yemeni manuscript, Jewish Yemeni manuscripts, we have a very important source of comparison with a Muslim manuscript from Yemen. It's called Mandal Sulaimani. Here on the lower left, you can see a fragment from an article by Anne Rugor, and we can see several. I mean, it looks a little as like sharing the same maybe cultural world. Although, as far as I could understand, in the Jewish manuscripts that I look at, these symbols are not indicating demons. They are actually humans. This is for sure. It's true on the figure you see on the upper left. On the upper right, I'm not so sure. I couldn't really understand it. It really looks like the demon from the Muslim manuscript to my eyes, but I will be happy to hear what you think. So this is inner Yemeni influences. But if we look to the Arabian Peninsula, we can see in Oman this figure on the silver plaque here, which represents a female demon called Asubian. It's in some ways it's parallel to the Jewish Lilith, and this figure is very much identified with this female demon. And interestingly, on the left, you can see a Jewish ketubah from Yemen. At the center, you can see something that somehow resembles this image. I asked Shalom Tzabar, and he agreed. The resemblance is quite amazing, but it's not exactly the same. So still needs requires additional examination. Okay, and if we look further to the east, to the western shores of India, we can see many similarities. This is, of course, not unique only to amuletic objects, but if we remember that Indian merchants from Western India came to Yemen for centuries, we can see this kind of similarities and ask what happened there in the process of cultural contact. And looking to the west, to Africa, we can see shared practices in the actual way people are writing these amuletic texts. And here, for example, you can see on the right Christian Ethiopian amulets. I took this picture in Vienna. And on the left, a Yemeni text. And you can see some of the text is written in an ink that is red. Probably they used henna leaves for that. But the text in red are specifically all sorts of sacred names or string letters. You can even see on the lower part these kind of talasim, these shapes that represent any kind of angelic or divine entities. And you can see the same thing in Ethiopian texts on the right. So, I mean, this is just to point out these kind of similarities that I see. I still don't know what that means, but it definitely makes me want to look into Jewish Ethiopian tradition of writing these texts and see if we can find any more similarities. Okay, moving a bit onwards. 19th century Yemeni silversmithing underwent transformation influenced in part by the Ottoman occupation and the arrival of Ottoman soldiers and technology. Carmela Abdar identified varying degrees of receptivity to innovation, noting that Jewish objects tended to be more conservative compared to Muslim ones. Jewish ritual items were relatively static. Jewelry for Jewish weddings exhibited minor changes, while silversmithing for Muslims displayed more openness to adaptation. And this hierarchy can be partially illustrated by the following anecdote recorded from Mori Salem Shhib, a late 19th century Jewish silversmith from Sana'a. And this is what he says. I'm quoting, "I had already earned a reputation for my craftsmanship, even among Gentiles. Before I even finished a ring, there would already be 2 or 3 buyers. One day, I was working near Bab al-Yaman by the soldiers' quarters when an Ottoman officer approached me. He said, 'Are you Salem Shhib?' 'Yes,' I replied. The officer, 'I want you to make me a ring like the one on my finger.' 'Give me the ring and I will make a copy.' 'No, not like that. Instead of the stone, I want you to inscribe the name Yud Hey Vav Hey, the Jewish 4-letter name of God.' 'How do you know that name?' 'I was in Istanbul and had a friend who was the chief rabbi there. He had a ring inscribed with this name. I knew it was sacred.' And then Shhib refuses to make this kind of ring for him. 'Why do you need this? I will inscribe, "Our Sultan shall live forever," in Turkish for you.' So I did find some more evidence in other narratives that these rings were made by Jews for Ottoman soldiers, suggesting that while this specific anecdote describes a singular event and does not represent a general trend, it illustrates how the Ottoman occupation influenced the production of various silversmithing items, including sacred inscriptions. Nevertheless, in alignment with the hierarchy Abdal proposed, it appears that the Jewish silversmith in this specific case refused the officer's request to inscribe the sacred name. Okay. So I see I'm almost out of time. So I think I will just skip the majority of the last part that I wanted to talk about, which is what happened after the immigration to Palestine and later to Israel. But I will just conclude with a last example of a current day young Yemeni silversmith working in Israel today, and he's a very dear friend of mine. His name is Ovadia Gial. You can see him here on the right. And Ovadia's grandfather, Shukri, that you see here on the left, he was a very famous um, um, writer of amulets. And Ovadia wanted to continue his grandfather's legacy, but he gives it a different interpretation, and in some ways he the art that he makes is does not carry any longer an protective or amuletic property, but rather expresses his social and ethnic identity. And I'll just show you maybe two examples, and here I will conclude. So, for example, you see here on the right a silver plaque on which you read on the margins Ashkenazim, Temanim, Sfaradim, Hararim, which are all names of different ethnic groups in Israeli society. And in the center, you see the Star of David or Khatem Suleiman. And inside the Star of David, sorry, you can see the symbol of the למ"ס, הלשכה המרכזית לסטטיסטיקה, the Central Office of Statistics. And this is a kind of protest of how this statistic office treats all of these kind of categories. And it's as he told me, this was actually after reading a very interesting paper by Sigal Ronagar about the practices of this לשכה המרכזית לסטטיסטיקה. And finally, and this is really the last one, you can see an amulet against Asubian, or rather Alvitsobian. So you have Asubian, which is the female demon we mentioned before, but you have Vitso as an organization that he wants to express criticism towards. Mainly here, it's addressed to the Yemeni children affair. And so you have this kind of mashed up symbols together, and you can see also in the center of his work this symbol of Asubian. So in a way, he transforms these once expressions of belief to expressions of other things, yes, of his identity, of political and social protest, and of his own legacy. So I will finish here. There are many other subjects that I wanted to mention, but I think I will stop and maybe we can get to them in the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. It was indeed a lecture and learned a lot about Yemeni-Jewish amulets. And I will now open the floor for questions and comments. So yes, please, Yaki.
Hey, first, Tom, thank you for a very interesting, fascinating lecture. I have a few questions. First of all, I noticed your surname is Fogel. Have you considered after this research to change it to a spur? The bird, the Arabic word for bird. I wonder what was the reason you've chosen to focus on the Yemen Jews out of the Sephardic Jews, the entire Sephardic Jews community, and is there any evidence, God forbid, for emulates in the Ashkenazi Jews? Because normally Ashkenazi Jews are kind of keep distance from this type of symbols, as far as I can tell.
Should I answer now or?
Yeah, that was all my questions. Just change your name before.
No, thank you. I'm just asking Marianne,
Yeah,
should we collect questions or whatever?
I think it's easier if you answer now. If you,
okay.
but if you prefer,
no, it's okay. So thank you, Yaki, for the comment. I like the name Fogel, so I will keep it for now. Why do I focus in Yemen is just a question of the way I got to this specific study. As Lior mentioned in the introduction, my initial field was actually the history of ethnographic research about this community. So during this, I noticed that many former scholars, especially scholars I looked into their work from from the 1930s, Erich Brauer, Shlomo Dov Goitein, and others, I noticed that it was very interesting for me to read the way they wrote about this specific subject. So I thought to myself, it would be interesting first to read again their works about this topic, about let's say magic or saint veneration and other religiously vague practices. And when I did that, I felt, okay, maybe I should also try to say something about the culture itself, not just about how people used to study it. And this is the way I got into this topic. But I feel just towards the end of your comment, I think research shows very clearly that these elements of Jewish religiosity are shared throughout the world. So it's not a matter of East and West or anything like that. And I would also mention that in a way, focusing on these phenomena in Yemen, it's challenging because I do not want to do what people did in the 30s. I want to do something that relates also to the current research, both in Jewish magic, both in field of anthropology of religion. So this is the challenge here, to do something that is meaningful to our academic generation.
Yes, undoubtedly the Yemen-Jewish are very challenging, the very least to say challenging. Just a follow-up question. Can you
Oh, we don't hear you.
Got muted.
Yeah, I was unmuted by the host. So just if you can say something about similar amulets among other Jewish communities, the Ashkenazis, or you have not
It's
tried it
very
broadly.
wide. It's very wide, but as I mentioned several times, so many of the, I mean, especially the textual elements that I showed, it's not unique to the Yemeni case. Yeah, so many of them are shared throughout the Jewish world.
I understand. I'm just trying to think with you to brainstorm. If you look at the emulate tradition these days, it's much more common among the Sephardic Jews.
I don't know.
As an
It's a good
Iraqian,
question.
I can tell you that in my family it was more pronounced than with my sister-in-law, which is Ashkenazi, and I wonder if it has any history or background going back. That's the question that flies in my mind. But I understand there is no one answer to that. Just like
Yeah, I feel I can't answer that right now because
I
I think
understand.
it's very wide, you know.
It's
So
wide. It's wide. It's
yeah.
just like. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for this very interesting talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ira, yes, please.
Tom, thank you. I have, you mentioned at the outset that there was a material aspect, a textual aspect, and a narrative aspect. And in the narrative aspect, you also touched on Gnosticism and secrecy. So I'm interested in whether your research has uncovered anything about the Gnostic and secret aspects of this whole tradition. Specifically, do you think, for example, that the encasement of these parchments is meant to keep these texts secret from the wearer and from the devil, perhaps? But I was interested in the relationship between secrecy and prayer, for example, and this is on a continuum. And I wonder whether you can comment about the secrecy aspect of amuletry in Yemen.
Thank you very much for the comment. I wrote it down for me. I mean, when I talk about secrecy, I relate to subjects that I find in the narratives that I look at. So parts of that I mentioned, as I said, that Ba'alei Hefetz, these amulet writers, would keep their books hidden from sight, and especially from other writers. Yeah, so this is one aspect, but you just mentioned another one, which is very interesting, which is, of course, when a text is inserted inside a pendant or a silver case, people are very reluctant to open it. This is also one of the reasons that actual amulet parchments are rare and are much less available for me, for example, to study them than the books. So yes, I mean, as you said, people are very much reluctant to open these cases, either because it is considered dangerous, or maybe it would bring you bad luck, or it would make the amulet it would make it unusable. However, in some cases where the narrative is a narrative of I opened a case, and sometimes people open the case and they see a piece of newspaper, or they see all kinds of things that are surprising or disappointing. So this is also something that I find there. But I really appreciate the comment, and maybe I should make it more elaborated in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? If not, in the meantime, I have a question. You mentioned during the lecture that there was this group of women from Jerusalem, and it's an amulet that doesn't look like. Do you remember? It was
Thank you.
Today now in the Museum Israel. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit about it.
Thank you for bringing that up. Maybe I'll just share the picture.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
It's I mentioned that regarding Erich Brauer's work, an ethnology of Yemeni Jews that he published in 1934, and it was based on his studies and interviews of Yemeni immigrants in Jerusalem. So in the Israel Museum, you have his notebooks. And I don't know if any of you ever heard of Erich Brauer, but he was also a very skilled painter. So his paintings or sketches of objects that he sees are very, very interesting. And this specific one, I brought it here because he mentions this is an amulet. He mentions it was made by Yemeni women in Jerusalem, and interestingly, it doesn't look like anything we find in Yemen. So they took a khamsa, which is not a Yemeni artifact. They took a silver plate with the Star of David or Solomon's seal, which could be a Yemeni of Yemeni craftsmanship. A bone, you can see this kind of elongated shape. This is a bone of a bird, okay, and two beads, and all of these were connected by a string, and this is an object that he brings. He cites this in his book as a Yemeni artifact. I found it very interesting. First, that it was made by women, and it really shows these kind of cultural contexts that happened in Jerusalem in the 30s when he did his research. So this is why I mentioned that.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Ernesto, please. You have.
This was a very interesting and great lesson. I want to tell about what my mentions. At first, I tried to see in the symbols or the sense or some system, and at least we got shown about that. And the difference to other symbols, I saw that they are not so clear, and some like your or other symbols, and so their function is not one. And there's no personal strength of the symbols of the first group of symbols that we saw. They are like an alphabet, as we get told. And so, like this alphabet, it is not one happening for what they are. It's more looks like for keeping or a situation for in good stage, or some history, not to got bad. And maybe it is about places and time, the first group. And then we saw these human-like pictures. There were two groups. The first group, I think there are some like anatomy. Maybe it is for health. It looks like a medical or landscape. This schema of human body, and maybe these are for healing. It's a purpose for healing of people, because the sense we got that there are written blessings and not curses. So we are not cursing and healing, and we write the blessing and make signs to these landscapes or sketches of the human body, that there would be a connection. The other group is that of these called demons, and it is interesting. There were three of them with three, and they were characteristic, one and one. And the first one is like energy, has an energy like he's flying. The third one is some stormy chaotic, and the one in the middle is about swallowing and spitting energy. And I saw three signs like them in the Ashkenazic drawings against Lilith.
Yes.
And they are drawn like three dragons, little dragons or birds. And the places between it belonged to the old Hungary, and now it is in Austria. The place where there are almost all Jews from there were killed, but only the places stayed there. Interesting is there the geology of this place, because there are volcanics and also radioactive stones, and maybe this is also an influence for this magic-like thinkings.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I will just
yeah.
thank you. I will just mention that, first of all, about all of these kind of different alphabets or scripts, magical scripts. I mean, looking at these symbols thoroughly, it just requires comparing a lot of manuscripts from all over the world, and some people that are more that are dealing with in the discipline of Jewish magic actually do that. So this is one. And I mean, for me, it's not about deciphering their meaning, but it's more about talking about the meaning that the people using these texts, what meaning do they bestow to these characters? And just to mention about this diagram, this human diagram that I showed, and I'll just come back to that in a moment because I think it will be interesting for everyone. So this diagram on the left, which resembles a human body, it's actually an incantation to harm someone. Yeah? So the letters or the numbers surrounding each one of the person's organs. I mean, if you want to harm the person in his heart, you write a certain kind of letter, or in his arm or leg, his head, etc. So it's actually not for healing. It's the other way around.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions and comments. And I see that we have more questions, but we are a little bit running out of time. But I am sure that you can ask Tom. We have your email address, and I am sure that we can. For example, Ira, I see that you have still a question, but we will give you the email address of Tom, and you can ask afterward. So thank you again for coming, and I invite you for next week, and the same day, same time, a lecture about by Abigail Meyer about collecting and exhibiting Jewish material culture in Encyclopedic Museum. And here, thank you, Tzvi, for showing us the poster, beautiful poster. So I hope we can see you next week. So thank you very much, and thank you, Tom, for giving the lecture, and see you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.